This past week, I had the opportunity of meeting with Ariana and learning about the Venezuelan educational system. In our meeting, overall, we spoke mostly in English, but she did use some words in Spanish because she knows I kind of understand it. The Venezuelan system is more similar to the Brazilian system than it is to the American system, but at the same time, it still has a lot of differences. One interesting thing was to see that some things that she mentioned that are currently happening in Venezuela used to be that way in Brazil. So two things that she mentioned. First is that Venezuela has only 11 years of school. Brazil used to be like that. We used to have only 11 years, and now we have 12. We changed it about 8 years ago. And also, the process to apply to college in Venezuela used to be the way we did it in Brazil. So each university has its own exam, and if you want to apply to that university, you have to take that specific exam. There's no standardized test, no nation test. It is only the exam for that university. So if you want to apply to 10 universities, you have to take 10 different exams. And like 5 or 6 years ago, Brazil started adopting a national standardized test. So it was interesting to see how we used to be more similar than we are now. Another thing that Ariana mentioned and I thought was very interesting is that in Venezuela, they have specific colors for specific grades on the uniform. So when you're walking on a hallway of any school, you know which grade that student is because of the color of their uniform. And I thought that was very interesting. Something that was probably the most shocking thing for me is that once you finish preschool, you have to take an exam to make sure you can read, and you can only go to first grade after you pass that exam. So if you don't pass the exam, they make you take an extra year of preschool. However, after first grade, the government passed a law a few years back that schools cannot flunk students. So in preschool, they do this exam and they make you repeat if you don't pass it. But after that point, it doesn't matter what your scores are, what your grades are, what your performance is. Schools cannot flunk their students. And she was mentioning that it's because how weak the public school system is and a lot of people weren't graduating. But it was very interesting to think of how that can affect the students. If you don't need a grade to pass, will students actually try? Will they study? Will they engage in school? And it was very interesting to see that. Also, an interesting point was that in Venezuela, every day they sing the national anthem and the state anthem before class. In Brazil, when I was attending regular Brazilian schools, we used to have the national anthem once a week. And when I started attending the American school of my city, we had the Brazilian national anthem Monday and the American national anthem Friday. But that was it. And she was telling me that every single day, students line up, they sing the national anthem and the state anthem. Another very interesting point she told me was that her state is actually an island. It's called the Margarita Island. And the most important economical sector of the island is tourism. So students have to take tourism in high school. And just like in Brazil, students can't choose their classes in Venezuela. There is a pre-established schedule for each grade, and all the students on that grade take those specific classes. But because she's from an island that depends on tourism, they added that in the curriculum. So it was very interesting to see how they were kind of guiding or preparing students to go in that field because it's the field that the island most needs people to work in. One thing that called my attention when talking to Ariana was her mentioning how the crisis recently in Venezuela affected the educational system. So, like in Brazil, public schools are not that good. So a lot of people that can afford it pay for their children to go to private schools. She was telling me that because of the crisis and because of inflation, and a lot of people stopped having the money to pay private education. So her class went from 16 in a year to 7 in the other year. And she was mentioning that it's a fear in Venezuela that this generation won't have as good as education than previous, because they're receiving worse education because of the crisis. It was a great experience talking to Ariana. It was very enriching to see differences and similarities and how other aspects outside education affect the educational system.